There's a moment in every Sigma male's life when the world finally notices what it ignored for years. And that moment is never loud. It begins in silence, in shadows, in the spaces where no one was paying attention. Then, without warning, he shifts. People don't understand what changed. They only feel the atmosphere tighten. The same man who blended into the background suddenly carries a presence that cannot be overlooked. The quiet observer becomes the quiet force, and everything around him adjusts. This is the moment he stops being invisible and starts becoming unstoppable. The transformation doesn't happen because he became someone new. It happens because he finally stops dimming what was always there. He stops shrinking himself to keep others comfortable, stops hiding his insight to avoid conflict, stops apologizing for the depth, focus, and discipline that once made people misunderstand him. When he removes the restraints life taught him to wear, his mind sharpens, his purpose crystallizes, and his silence becomes strategy rather than survival. People who never took him seriously suddenly find themselves studying him, following him, competing with him, and failing to understand how he grew so far ahead while saying so little. What makes him unstoppable isn't power, it's clarity. When he starts moving with intention instead of hesitation, the world feels the shift. Opportunities align, distractions fall away, and every step he takes hits with precision. Those who underestimated him now feel the weight of their miscalculation, and once he reaches this state, there is no going back to who he was before. If you want more psychological breakdowns like this, make sure you subscribe to Silent Wise and drop the word ascend in the comments if you're ready for the moment you become unstoppable too. He stops seeking approval, and his independence becomes magnetic. He reaches a turning point the moment he stops shaping his choices around the expectations of others. The need for approval, that subtle, invisible thread that once tugged at him, snaps cleanly. And in that moment, something in his presence shifts. He no longer hesitates before speaking his truth, no longer softens his edges to make others comfortable, no longer dilutes his ambition to avoid seeming too much. As he detaches from the hunger for validation, a new kind of gravity forms around him. People can feel it before they understand it. The quiet certainty of someone who no longer needs permission to exist as he is. That independence becomes magnetic, drawing attention even when he makes no effort to be seen. What makes this transformation powerful is how silently it unfolds. He doesn't announce it. He simply starts trusting his inner compass more than the noise around him. Decisions become cleaner. Boundaries become firmer. His confidence stops fluctuating based on who approves and who doesn't. And because he is no longer bending himself to win acceptance, he stands straighter, thinks clearer, and moves with a calm that pulls people in without saying a word. Those who once overlooked him find themselves studying him, trying to understand how someone so quiet can radiate so much presence. His independence doesn't push people away. It exposes who was only drawn to him when he was small enough to control. As he steps deeper into this self-driven identity, something remarkable happens. The world begins to respond differently. Opportunities he once hesitated to claim now move toward him because his energy signals readiness. People who underestimated him sense a shift they can't explain. Their reactions become a reflection of his evolution. The less he needs approval, the more powerful he becomes, because true strength has always belonged to the ones who walk their path without waiting for applause. His independence turns into a force that shapes how others see him, how they speak to him, and how they remember him. And from that moment forward, he is no longer invisible. He is undeniable. He masters self-discipline, turning quiet routines into unstoppable momentum. His transformation doesn't begin with some dramatic breakthrough. It begins in the quiet hours when no one is watching. While others chase motivation, he builds discipline. He understands that greatness is formed not in loud victories, but in the silent repetition of small, consistent actions. The world sees routine. He sees momentum. Each early morning, each focused hour, each sacrifice compounds into something powerful. What starts as simple structure slowly hardens into unwavering discipline, and this discipline becomes the engine behind his rise. People don't notice the shift at first, but the results begin speaking louder than he ever needs to. His routines sharpen him, strengthen him, and make him unstoppable long before anyone realizes he's transforming. As he commits to these patterns, his relationship with time changes. He stops chasing distractions, stops entertaining meaningless noise, stops giving energy to things that don't serve his purpose. His days gain clarity, and his mind becomes sharper. He discovers that discipline isn't about restriction, it's about liberation. It frees him from indecision, from emotional chaos, from the pull of instant gratification. Most people underestimate how powerful quiet consistency is, but he doesn't. He knows that the habits built in silence become the foundation for achievements that appear impossible to everyone else. His momentum grows not because he moves faster, but because he moves with precision, intention, and unbreakable rhythm. And then the world begins to notice. They see the results, but not the discipline behind them. They see the strength, but not the repetition that built it. They see the confidence, but not the battles he fought with himself in the quiet moments. What they interpret as sudden success is simply the visible tip of a monumental internal effort. His discipline becomes the invisible force that separates him from the crowd. While others wait for inspiration, he is already in motion. While others lose focus, he accelerates. His quiet routines evolve into unstoppable momentum, the kind that carries him far beyond what anyone expected, including the version of himself he left behind. He cuts off draining connections, freeing his energy for elevation. His rise begins the moment he realizes that not everyone around him deserves access to his time, mind, or emotional space. He starts recognizing the weight of people who drain more than they give, the ones who demand attention but offer no support, who create noise but no value, who benefit from his presence while weakening his spirit. Instead of confronting them loudly, he simply steps back. He withdraws his energy, detaches his attention, and lets those connections fade without ceremony. This act isn't coldness, it's clarity. By cutting off what drains him, he creates room for what strengthens him. And in that space, his elevation begins. As his circle shrinks, his focus grows sharper. Emotional clutter dissolves. Mental clarity expands. He no longer wastes energy explaining himself to people determined not to understand him, nor does he carry the burdens of relationships built on imbalance. For the first time, he feels the power of conserving his energy for goals that matter, for people who genuinely reciprocate, for environments that nourish rather than deplete. His silence becomes a filter, and only those aligned with his growth remain. The peace that follows is transformative. Without the emotional noise of draining connections, he begins to rise at a pace that surprises even him. What people don't realize is how much these invisible shifts contribute to his becoming unstoppable. The moment he stops feeding relationships that suffocate him, he gains momentum that feels almost supernatural. His creativity expands, his confidence strengthens, his intuition sharpens. He starts glowing in ways he never could when he was surrounded by people who dimmed his light. Those who once held him back eventually notice the distance and the difference. They realize too late that his detachment wasn't rejection, it was evolution. By freeing his energy from the wrong connections, he built the foundation for a higher version of himself. And once he rises into that version, nothing and no one can pull him back down. He switches from observing life to strategically shaping it. For most of his life, he moved through the world as an observer, watching, analyzing, understanding the patterns others never noticed. His silence wasn't weakness, it was data collection. But something shifts the moment he decides observation alone is no longer enough. He steps out of the role of spectator and into the role of architect. Instead of adapting to life, he begins shaping it with precision. The same awareness that once made him quiet now becomes the foundation of his strategy. Every decision becomes intentional, every action calculated, every step aligned with a direction only he can see. This transition from watching to shaping marks the beginning of his ascent. What makes this transformation powerful is that it doesn't happen through force, it happens through clarity. He realizes that life isn't something that happens to him, it's something he can construct, refine, and redirect. He stops delaying his goals, stops waiting for perfect timing, stops allowing external noise to dictate his path. His inner world becomes the command center from which he orchestrates his plans. The dreams he once held privately turn into blueprints, and the intentions he once whispered become directives. His moves become so deliberate that even small actions create noticeable impact. The world starts reacting to him, not the other way around. As he steps fully into this strategic mindset, his progress accelerates. People sense the shift but can't pinpoint its exact source. They just know he carries himself differently. There is a new gravity in his choices, a new intelligence in his timing, a new certainty in his direction. He no longer drifts with circumstances, he engineers outcomes. And because he spent years observing first, his strategy is sharper than anything those who acted impulsively could ever match. This is the moment he becomes unstoppable, when he stops letting life unfold before him and instead begins shaping it with the quiet, deliberate force of someone who finally understands his own power. He stops explaining his vision and starts executing it in silence. He reaches a point where he no longer wastes breath trying to make people understand the world he sees in his mind. He stops offering explanations to those who lack the depth to grasp them, stops justifying timelines, stops outlining dreams to audiences who only respond with doubt or small thinking. Instead, he retreats into silence, not to hide, but to build. His vision becomes something sacred, protected from noise, judgment, and distraction. And in that silence, something powerful happens. His focus sharpens, his discipline strengthens, and every step he takes starts aligning with a future only he can currently see. While others are still talking about ideas, he is quietly living in the blueprint of his own becoming. As he shifts from speaking to executing, momentum begins to form around him. People sense a change but can't decipher it. His energy becomes more intentional, his time more guarded, his actions more deliberate. Without the pressure of outside opinions, he moves faster, thinks clearer, and works smarter. Silence becomes his strategy, not as withdrawal, but as acceleration. The less he explains, the more he creates. The more he creates, the more unstoppable he becomes. Every quiet effort compounds, turning into results that speak louder than any explanation he could have offered. He learns that vision doesn't need validation. It needs execution. And then the world starts reacting. Those who doubted him begin watching. Those who dismissed him start analyzing. Those who underestimated him feel something they can't express. The rising gravity of a man who chose action over approval. By the time his results become visible, his silence has already carried him far ahead. He doesn't need to convince anyone of who he is. His progress reveals it for him. This is the moment he becomes unstoppable, when he stops asking for understanding and starts building a reality so undeniable that silence becomes the loudest statement he ever makes. He embraces his solitude fully, and his clarity becomes a superpower. There comes a moment when solitude shifts from something he tolerates to something he hungers for. Instead of seeing it as isolation, he sees it as a sanctuary, a place where his thoughts sharpen, his emotions settle, and his vision becomes unmistakably clear. In that quiet space, away from expectations and noise, he reconnects with himself at a depth most people never reach. He begins to understand which desires are truly his and which were inherited from others. The world's voices fade, and his own rises. And the more he embraces solitude, the more he realizes it doesn't weaken him. It strengthens him. In silence, he becomes his most powerful self. As he leans into this solitude, distractions lose their hold on him. He stops chasing validation, stops comparing himself to others, stops allowing external chaos to fog his direction. His mind becomes a clean, uncluttered landscape where ideas flow freely and insights strike with precision. He starts making decisions not from pressure or emotion, but from clarity, a clarity born only in stillness. This internal space becomes the forge where his future is shaped. He sees patterns others miss, understands motives before they are spoken, and anticipates outcomes with uncanny accuracy. His solitude becomes the engine behind his evolution, refining him into someone impossible to derail. What others interpret as loneliness is actually transformation. They don't see the breakthroughs happening behind his calm exterior, the inner realignments, the strength forming in the quiet. But the moment he emerges, they feel the change instantly. His presence becomes grounded, confident, unshakable. He knows who he is, what he wants, and what he refuses to accept. Clarity becomes his superpower, guiding every step, protecting his energy, and amplifying his purpose. This is the moment he becomes unstoppable, when solitude stops being a place he retreats to and becomes the foundation from which he rises. He outgrows environments that once limited him, shocking everyone who overlooked him. He doesn't rise through confrontation, he rises through evolution. Slowly, silently, he becomes too big for the places that once held him small. The rooms where he was underestimated, the circles where he was ignored, the conversations where his voice carried no weight. He begins to outgrow them all, not because he forces his way out, but because he expands in ways those environments can no longer contain. His mind stretches beyond the limits others placed on him. His ambitions evolve beyond what they believed he was capable of. And the moment he steps out of those limiting spaces, the shock is instantaneous. People who once dismissed him suddenly realize they misread him completely. As he rises, the contrast becomes undeniable. The same environments that once felt heavy start to feel tiny. The expectations that once boxed him in become irrelevant. He no longer adapts to the energy around him. He seeks spaces that match the magnitude of his growth. What others saw as quietness was actually preparation. What they interpreted as passivity was strategic patience. His transformation exposes how deeply they underestimated him, not because he changed overnight, but because they never looked closely enough to see the potential unfolding within him. When he leaves, he does so without noise, but his absence echoes louder than his presence ever did. What shocks people most is how effortlessly he elevates once he exits those limiting environments. His progress accelerates, his confidence crystallizes, and his path aligns in ways that seem almost impossible from the outside. They begin to understand that he was never the problem, the environment was. And now that he has risen beyond it, there is no version of him that can fit back into the space he outgrew. His evolution becomes a mirror reflecting their stagnation, their doubt, their failure to see his worth. The man they once overlooked becomes the man they can't stop watching, and that is the moment he becomes unstoppable, when he outgrows the world that once tried to keep him small. He aligns his actions with long-term purpose, making him impossible to derail his life. Changes the moment he stops living by impulse and starts living by impulse and starts living by intention. Instead of chasing momentary satisfaction, he begins aligning every decision with a purpose that stretches far beyond the present moment. His actions stop being reactions and start becoming investments in his future, his growth, his identity. This alignment creates a power most people never experience, clarity of direction. When his daily choices reflect his long-term vision, distractions lose their pull, temptations lose their shine, and setbacks lose their power. He becomes a man moving with such deliberate momentum that derailing him becomes nearly impossible. Purpose becomes the compass that guides him, and discipline becomes the fuel that keeps him moving. As his life shifts into alignment, people notice a difference in his presence. He stops wasting time in places that drain him, stops pursuing goals that don't fit his deeper values, stops engaging with people who pull him away from the future he's building. His focus sharpens like a blade. Those who once influenced him emotionally or socially now find their power fading because he no longer moves based on external pressure, only on internal clarity. Everything becomes intentional. The conversations he entertains, the habits he builds, the challenges he accepts. This level of alignment makes him resilient in ways others can't comprehend. Obstacles that would break someone else merely redirect him back to his path, and then the shift becomes undeniable. He no longer looks like someone trying to figure out his life. He looks like someone executing it. His growth becomes steady, his confidence grounded, his progress undeniable. People who once doubted him now find themselves analyzing his discipline, wondering how he became so focused, so consistent, so unstoppable. The answer is simple. He aligned his actions with his purpose, and once a man knows where he's going, nothing can stand in his way. He doesn't need motivation or applause. His purpose pulls him forward, and that gravitational force makes him a threat to every limitation that once held him back. He realizes his worth, and the moment he does, nothing and no one can slow his ascent. The most powerful shift happens the instant he recognizes his own value, not the value others assign to him. Not the worth filtered through doubt or dismissal, but the truth of who he has always been. This realization hits like a quiet awakening. He stops questioning whether he is enough, stops apologizing for his depth, stops shrinking to fit into spaces that were never built for someone like him. Self-worth becomes the ignition switch. Once he sees himself clearly, his entire trajectory changes. The insecurities that once slowed him, the opinions that once shaped him, the limitations that once held him dissolve beneath the weight of self-recognition. From that moment, his ascent is no longer optional. It's inevitable. This newfound awareness strengthens everything he touches. His decisions gain confidence, his boundaries become firm, and his goals stretch wider than ever before. Those who once underestimated him now appear small, not because they changed, but because he no longer views himself through their lens. He stops chasing validation and starts chasing potential. Every step he takes reflects a man who finally believes in his own capacity to rise. And as that belief deepens, his momentum accelerates. Opportunities align, clarity intensifies, and hesitation fades. He no longer asks if he's ready. He acts as if he already is. That shift alone separates him from the version of himself the world once ignored. People feel the difference long before they understand it. They see it in his posture, hear it in his silence, feel it in the way he moves through a room with a kind of grounded certainty that cannot be faked. Nothing external can deter him anymore. Not criticism, not envy, not doubt. Once a man knows his worth, the world loses its power to distract him from his destiny. His ascent becomes a straight line, not because the path is easy, but because he is unshakable. He rises not by force, but by truth. And truth, once awakened, cannot be slowed, silenced, or stopped. When a Sigma finally steps into his full power, it's never because the world handed him permission. It's because he reclaimed every piece of himself that he once gave away. The shift is internal, the rise is intentional, and the impact is undeniable. He moves from invisible to unstoppable, not by becoming louder, but by becoming truer. And once that transformation happens, there is no force strong enough to pull him back into the shadows he outgrew. If you want more deep cinematic psychology breakdowns like this, make sure you subscribe to Silent Wise, the home of the quiet, the strategic, and the unstoppable. Drop the word unstoppable in the comments so I know you're part of the ones who rise without needing to announce it.